Some films go beyond pushing boundaries. They shatter them entirely. They are the movies that left censors trembling, governments scrambling, and audiences wondering if they had witnessed art or an outright crime. Today we step into the forbidden vault to uncover the shocking history of 15 movies so outrageous, so unsettling that they were banned around the world. 1. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange was never meant to be a quiet film. From its opening scene, Alex, dressed in white with his gang of droogs, staring into the camera, audiences knew this was something different. The violence was stylized yet disturbingly intimate, paired with Beethoven's music in ways that made it even more unsettling. The controversy wasn't limited to critics. Soon after its UK release, real-life crimes eerily similar to scenes from the movie began to surface. Media outlets claimed it was inspiring copycat violence. The outrage swelled to the point where Kubrick himself took an unprecedented step. He pulled the film from circulation in Britain. It stayed unavailable in the UK for decades, becoming an underground legend, the movie you could only see if you knew someone with a bootleg VHS. Elsewhere, A Clockwork Orange was banned outright for its portrayal of gang violence, home invasion, and what many considered dangerous moral ambiguity. In countries like Ireland, South Africa, and Singapore, authorities felt it could erode social order. Even where it wasn't banned, the debate raged for years. Was it a warning about state control or a celebration of chaos? By the time it returned to UK theaters in 2000, its legacy was cemented. A Clockwork Orange had gone from scandal to classic, but it remained a film you could never watch passively. Its ban only fueled its power, making it one of the most infamous pieces of cinema in history. 2. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. When the Texas Chainsaw Massacre hit screens, it wasn't the gore that shocked people. It was the relentless, almost suffocating atmosphere of dread. Director Tobe Hooper claimed it was inspired partly by real events, particularly the crimes of Ed Gein. What he created was a film so raw that it left audiences shaken long after the credits rolled. Despite containing far less blood than its reputation suggested, the movie's unflinching violence, screaming chaos, and the unforgettable sight of Leatherface wielding a chainsaw were enough to get it banned in multiple countries. In Britain, it was caught in the video nasty panic, accused of being too disturbing for home viewing. Some countries, including Australia, refused to screen it at all. The power of the film came from its documentary-like style. You felt like you were trapped with the victims, unable to escape the heat, the grime, and the terror. This realism made it even harder for censors to accept. It didn't feel like fiction. Over time, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre became recognized as a masterpiece of horror, influencing countless filmmakers. Yet, for years, it could only be seen through censored cuts or underground copies. Its ban didn't kill it. It made it an unstoppable legend. 3. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Few films have ever sparked as much pure outrage as Cannibal Holocaust. Ruggero Deodato's movie was presented as found footage, following a documentary crew into the Amazon jungle. What unfolds is a brutal story of exploitation, violence, and the darkest parts of human nature, both in the tribes depicted and in the outsiders filming them. The most infamous aspect was the very real killing of animals on camera. This, combined with simulated acts of extreme brutality, led to the film being banned in over 50 countries. In Italy, authorities even arrested Deodato, suspecting that some of the actors had actually been murdered for the production. He had to bring them to court alive to prove otherwise. Even after proving no human deaths occurred, Cannibal Holocaust remained one of the most censored films ever made. Some bans lasted decades, and even modern uncut versions are often trimmed. Whether seen as a savage critique of media exploitation or pure shock cinema, it's a film that refuses to be forgotten or forgiven. 4. The Exorcist, 1973. When The Exorcist premiered, it terrified audiences like no film before. Based on a novel inspired by an alleged real exorcism, it told the story of a young girl possessed by a demonic force. Linda Blair's performance as Regan, with her voice altered into a deep, menacing growl, her head spinning, and her body convulsing, left viewers fainting and vomiting in theaters. The Catholic Church condemned it, calling it blasphemous. In the UK, while it was initially shown in theaters, its home video release was banned for over a decade. In places like Singapore and Malaysia, it was banned entirely for its religious content and graphic depiction of supernatural evil. The controversy only made it more popular, lines stretched around blocks, and the hysteria surrounding it became part of the marketing. The Exorcist proved that sometimes banning a movie only ensures it will be remembered forever, and feared for just as long. 5. The Last Temptation of Christ, 1988. When Martin Scorsese released The Last Temptation of Christ, he knew it would be controversial, but he couldn't have predicted the storm that followed. Based on the novel by Nikos Kazantzakis, the film portrays Jesus not only as the Son of God, but also as a man struggling with fear, temptation, and doubt. The most incendiary element was a vision sequence in which Jesus imagines a life where he marries Mary Magdalene. Religious groups erupted in outrage. Across the United States, protests sprang up outside theaters. In Paris, a screening was attacked with tear gas. In countries like Greece, Chile, and Singapore, the film was banned outright for blasphemy. Some bans lasted decades, with government officials declaring that the movie undermined the foundation of Christian faith. Scorsese defended his work, insisting that it was not intended as an attack on religion, but as an exploration of Christ's humanity. Yet for many, that was precisely the problem. Showing Jesus as a man, with human desires, crossed a sacred line. The controversy grew so intense that some theaters in the U.S. refused to screen it out of fear for staff safety. Despite the uproar, The Last Temptation of Christ has since been recognized for its artistry and thought-provoking take on spirituality. Willem Dafoe's portrayal of Jesus and Scorsese's visual storytelling turned it into a lasting piece of cinematic debate. Its ban history is a reminder that challenging deeply held beliefs can make a film as dangerous to authorities as any violent shocker. 6. Pink Flamingos, 1972. John Waters' Pink Flamingos wasn't just a movie, it was a dare. It promised to show the filthiest person alive, and it delivered on that promise with a barrage of outrageous taboo-smashing scenes. Drag icon Divine starred as the infamous criminal living in a trailer with her eccentric family, competing against another couple for the title of the most depraved person on Earth. The film's transgressive humor included acts that audiences had never seen before on screen, and in some cases, likely wished they hadn't. Its infamous final scene, involving Divine and a dog, became the stuff of underground legend. Censors around the world were quick to react. Pink Flamingos was banned in Australia, Norway, and several other countries for decades. In some places, merely possessing a copy could get you into legal trouble. For Waters, the bans only enhanced the film's cult appeal. Midnight screenings drew audiences who wanted to test their own limits, to see if they could handle it. The fact that governments tried to suppress it made it more than a movie. It was an act of rebellion to watch it. Today, Pink Flamingos is viewed as a milestone in queer cinema and a punk rock statement against respectability. But in the 1970s and beyond, its unapologetic filth made it public enemy number one for censors worldwide. 7th Battle Royale, 2000. Before the Hunger Games, there was Battle Royale, the Japanese shocker about a class of high school students forced by the government to fight to the death on a remote island. Directed by Kinji Fukasaku, the film combined sharp political satire with brutal, unflinching violence. It wasn't just the gore, it was the youth-on-youth carnage that unsettled authorities. In Japan, its release coincided with real-life debates about juvenile crime. Lawmakers openly condemned it, fearing it might inspire violence among teens. In some countries, such as South Korea, it was banned outright for years. Even in places where it wasn't officially banned, distributors hesitated to release it, keeping it out of theaters and making it difficult to find legally. Critics praise Battle Royale for its biting social commentary, seeing it as a reflection of a hyper-competitive society that pits the young against each other, but others saw nothing beyond the bloodshed. It became a cult hit through bootleg copies, passed around by word of mouth. The bans didn't kill its reputation. They amplified it. For a generation of film lovers, Battle Royale became the forbidden film you just had to see. And when you did, you realized that beneath the violence was a razor-sharp critique of the very culture that tried to silence it. 8. The Human Centipede. 2. 2011. If the first Human Centipede was already infamous, its sequel pushed things so far that even hardened horror fans were stunned. The Human Centipede 2 ditched the surgical cleanliness of the original and dove into grimy black and white depravity. It followed a mentally disturbed man obsessed with the first film, attempting to recreate its grotesque centipede experiment, but on a much larger and messier scale. The British Board of Film Classification refused to grant it a certificate, effectively banning it, citing scenes of gross sexual violence and explicit mutilation. Australia and New Zealand followed suit, with only heavily cut versions eventually allowed. In many territories, it was never released at all. Director Tom Six claimed it was satire, a commentary on the idea that violent films cause violent acts. But the film's unflinching brutality, lack of humor, and sheer nihilism made it one of the most heavily censored horror movies of its era. The ban became part of its identity. Fans sought out underground copies, while critics debated whether it was a legitimate piece of transgressive art or just exploitation for its own sake. Either way, The Human Centipede 2 proved that even in the modern era, a movie could still be too extreme for the censors. 9. Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom. 1975. Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, remains one of the most infamous films ever made, not just for its content, but for the dark shadow it casts over cinema history. Loosely based on the writings of the Marquis de Sade, the film relocates the story to the final days of Mussolini's fascist regime in Italy. It follows four powerful men who kidnap young men and women, subjecting them to a series of increasingly degrading acts. From its very first screenings, Salo was met with outrage. Authorities in Italy seized copies, and the film was banned in countries including the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and much of Scandinavia. The objections weren't just about nudity or violence. The movie combined sexual humiliation, sadism, and political allegory in ways that many found deeply disturbing. Pasolini's choice to blend political critique with graphic acts made Salo an enduring controversy. Supporters argued it was a searing attack on the dehumanizing effects of fascism. Detractors saw only exploitation. Even decades later, it remained one of the few films that major distributors refused to touch. In Britain, it was unavailable in its uncut form until the early 2000s, after prolonged debate. Adding to its infamy, Pasolini was murdered shortly before the film's release, under mysterious circumstances that some believe may have been linked to Salo. This tragic ending fueled the mythos surrounding the film, making it an object of morbid fascination. For many, watching Salo isn't entertainment. It's an endurance test, and for the censors who tried to bury it, the attempt only ensured its place in the history of banned cinema. 10th. Faces of Death. 1978. When Faces of Death first appeared, it didn't arrive in theaters with the backing of a major studio or a marketing campaign. It was whispered about, passed between friends, and labeled as something more than a movie, a dare. The so-called shockumentary claimed to feature real footage of death, disaster, and tragedy from around the world. In truth, Faces of Death was a mix of genuine newsreel clips and stage scenes made to look authentic. But to audiences in the late 1970s and 1980s, that distinction hardly mattered. It was unlike anything they had seen, and it sparked instant controversy. Many countries, including Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Europe, banned the film outright, citing obscenity laws and concerns over public morality. The United Kingdom's notorious video nasty list included Faces of Death, leading to its seizure from video stores and private collections. Even in places where it wasn't banned, it was often hidden behind the counter, sold only to those who specifically asked for it. For years, it existed as a whispered legend, the forbidden tape that only the bravest dared to watch. In reality, the stage segments were obvious to trained eyes, but for casual viewers, the illusion was powerful enough to make them believe they were witnessing real human deaths. Today, Faces of Death is recognized more as a cultural artifact than a piece of cinema, but its legacy is clear. It blurred the line between documentary and fiction in ways that left censors scrambling, and its ban cemented its reputation as one of the most notorious films ever created. 11. I Spit on Your Grave. 1978. Few films have divided audiences as fiercely as I Spit on Your Grave. Marketed initially as a grindhouse revenge thriller, it tells the story of a young woman brutally assaulted by a group of men, who then exacts violent revenge on her attackers. While some praised it as a raw, feminist statement on justice, others condemned it as exploitative and degrading. The graphic nature of the assault scenes made it a prime target for censors. In countries like the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Norway, it was banned outright for years. Even in the United States, some theaters refused to screen it, and when it did get a home video release, it was often in heavily cut versions. Critics in the late 1970s called it worthless garbage, but over time, the film gained a cult following among horror fans who saw it as a grim inversion of traditional horror tropes. The bans, however, ensured that it remained one of the most infamous titles in video history. Whether viewed as empowerment or exploitation, I Spit on Your Grave became a touchstone in debates about the limits of on-screen violence. And like many banned films, the attempts to suppress it only made more people want to see what the fuss was about. 12. The Interview. 2014. Most banned films are targeted for violence, obscenity, or blasphemy. The Interview, on the other hand, was pulled into an international political firestorm. This comedy, starring Seth Rogen and James Franco, revolved around a fictional plot to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Before its release, the North Korean government denounced the film, calling it an act of war. The situation escalated when Sony Pictures suffered a massive cyber attack, allegedly carried out by hackers linked to North Korea. The attackers released confidential data and threatened terrorist-style violence against any theater that showed the movie. Major cinema chains in the United States dropped the film, effectively halting its wide release. In North Korea, it was, of course, banned outright, and possessing a copy could lead to severe punishment. Even in South Korea, it was not officially released due to concerns about inflaming tensions. Eventually, The Interview was released online and in a handful of independent theaters. The controversy made it far more famous than it likely would have been otherwise, turning a raunchy political comedy into a symbol of free speech and defiance. Its ban wasn't about gore or obscenity. It was about the power of a movie to provoke a nation. 13. Naturalborn Killers. 1994. Oliver Stone's Naturalborn Killers was never meant to be subtle. Based on a story by Quentin Tarantino, it follows Mickey and Mallory Knox, a murderous couple who become media darlings in a twisted satire of celebrity culture. With rapid-fire editing, psychedelic visuals, and bursts of extreme violence, the film became a sensory assault, one that thrilled some viewers and horrified others. The controversy wasn't just about what happened on screen. Shortly after its release, several violent crimes were allegedly linked to the movie. In one infamous case, a young couple went on a killing spree in the United States, with the female accomplice claiming the film had inspired her. Lawsuits were filed against Oliver Stone and the studio, though they were eventually dismissed. Authorities in countries like Ireland and New Zealand banned the film entirely, citing concerns it glamorized mass murder. In other regions, it was heavily edited before being allowed to screen. Even in the United States, where it remained legal, some theaters refused to show it due to the growing media backlash. Stone defended the film as a critique of society's obsession with violence, not a celebration of it. Yet for many critics, the distinction was lost in the chaos of its style. The more people called for its ban, the more it became a must-see for those curious about what could cause such an uproar. Today, Naturalborn Killers stands as one of the most controversial films of the 1990s, a movie that blurred the line between condemning violence and reveling in it. 14. The Evil Dead, 1981. When Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead arrived, it looked like just another low-budget horror flick. But within minutes, audiences realized they were seeing something different and far more extreme. With its relentless pacing, demonic possession storyline, and over-the-top gore, it was equal parts terrifying and darkly comedic. In the United Kingdom, The Evil Dead quickly found itself on the infamous Video Nasty list during the early 1980s moral panic over violent movies. Authorities seized copies from stores, and the film was banned in certain regions for years. Australia and several European countries also refused to release it uncut, citing excessive violence and disturbing imagery. What made it especially controversial was its combination of graphic horror and inventive camera work, which gave the violence an almost visceral energy. For many censors, the film's creative flourishes made the gore even harder to dismiss. Yet the ban only fueled its reputation. Horror fans sought out bootleg VHS copies, passing them around like contraband. Raimi's scrappy, do-it-yourself style turned The Evil Dead into a cult classic, eventually spawning sequels, a TV series, and countless homages. Its journey from banned video nasty to beloved horror icon proves that sometimes censorship can't kill a film. It can only make it stronger. 15th Hostel, Part 2, 2007. By the time Hostel Part 2 was released, the torture horror subgenre was already controversial. Eli Roth's sequel doubled down on the premise of wealthy clients paying to kill kidnapped tourists in elaborately staged scenarios. This time, the victims were mostly young women, and the violence was more explicit than ever. The most infamous scene, involving a naked victim and a scythe, drew immediate condemnation from critics and censors alike. In New Zealand, the film was refused classification, effectively banning it unless heavily cut. The same happened in countries like Germany and Iceland, where authorities claimed that the movie served no purpose other than to shock and offend. Roth argued that the film was a satire of consumerism and power, but its graphic depictions of cruelty made it a lightning rod for debate. Even horror fans were divided. Some praised its boldness, others dismissed it as pure exploitation. Despite the bans, Hostel Part 2 found its audience through uncut home video releases in countries with looser censorship laws. Its legacy remains tied to the conversation about whether extreme horror can ever be considered art, or if some images simply go too far. From political firestorms to religious outrage, from courtroom battles to midnight bootlegs, these 15 films prove that cinema has the power to shock, disturb, and challenge authority. Which of these would you dare to watch? And which should stay locked away forever? If you enjoyed this journey into the forbidden, subscribe and join us for more stories that defy the censors.